This topic has been on my mind and heart for quite some time, and more specifically, as I've been building a relationship with Jesus and exploring his teachings and the basic principles or the cornerstones or the guidelines for living and being a decent human being. And for some of you, these would be common sense. Like even if we were like the 10 commandments, we could go there. They feel like common sense. For you, the listener, if you're here right now, you may already in your heart of hearts know murder is not the answer. Like you could know that in your heart of hearts. For some people, that's not common sense. That is not common sense, and that is the answer to all the problems or whatever it is. Once again, like we do live in a very, I'm going to say, demon possessed world, but at the same time, murder is not the answer, and that feels like common sense to you, but to some folks out there, it's not. And I've really been thinking about this because, well, I don't identify with the new age anymore. I don't necessarily resonate with the new age anymore and spirituality. And it's not that I'm not spiritual and I'm not religious either. It's like being in the in between of knowing that God is real, knowing that we are spiritual beings, knowing that there are specific ways to be in this world and to live in this world and to love in this world. And it is wonderful to have sovereignty. It is wonderful to have autonomy and freedom. And at the same time, humans are flawed. We need guidelines. I don't want to say rules for living. Like your girl here is a double Aquarius. You tell me to do something, I'm gonna fight it, heels dug in, or do the exact opposite of what you're telling me. Like there's stubborn, rebel, I'm all here for freedom. Okay. However, I find in the new age and spirituality, and once again, this is not to judge, this is my own personal experience, and I'm sharing about, what I've been struggling with. There have been struggles. There have been meltdowns and breakdowns through the transition of how do I want to be in this world? How do I want to walk in this world? What are my morals? What are my values? How do they reflect in the world? So much is about being, authentic into the core of the morals and the values and the beliefs, and then like to be the embodiment of that in the world. And I found in the spirituality and the new age, it's just I'm all here for go with the flow as well. Like I don't want to discredit go with the flow and allow things to be, but it's so loosey goosey. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I mean. And this goes across the board to new age, to spirituality, to religion. Like it goes across the board because there's pastors that got their Bentleys and their jet planes and going back to the Bentleys where his congregation saying, can we drive your Bentley? And the pastor saying no. So it's just like it goes across the board. There's corruption everywhere. There's a lack of moral integrity everywhere. However, what I'm saying is what I've noticed is so much flexibility and freedom might alter the way that you live, even if some things feel like common sense to you. And I can only share my personal experience and transformations that I've seen in my life. However, what I've really noticed is the more that I have been exploring who Jesus was through his word, through my relationship with him, I find that I look at things a lot differently. And it got me curious about exploring the Bible. Okay. And that is something that I never in a million freaking years would have ever thought to look at. 10 Commandments. And like I laugh and I'm not going to hide it. that has changed me in a sense to look at, because it's so basic. It seems so simple. These are the cornerstones or foundations of living. But at the same time, there's many of them I wasn't living, but being spiritual, being, and there's this illusion of enlightenment. Yes, we can become enlightened, but at the end of the day, enlightenment, it has nothing to do with you. Enlightenment is walking the path closer to God. Enlightenment opens you up to walking the path closer to God. Enlightenment brings you closer to God. It has nothing to do with you. And from being in that world, and once again, not to judge, I'm talking about my own personal experience. Like, it was so ego charged, ego fueled. When I think about it, when I even like flash back to me a couple years ago, like so ego fueled. I do this and I do that and I. Like, no credit to God, no credit to source, no credit to the higher power. Like, we we're humans. Yes, we're powerful, but because we are created from God, the divine source, the infinite creator, the supreme source. And that, like, I feel like I'm stumbling on my words because there's parts of it where when I look back, not judging myself, either having compassion with myself, but when I look back, it's like, you were so deceived. You were so fooled. In the perspective of, yes, we can create our realities, and yes, we can co-create with the divine, but at the end of the day, there is a divine plan, there's divine order, there's divine rule, and us thinking that we have the ability to change or manipulate that is very egoic. I believe it's very egoic. And when I was living in like the prime, we could say, living in the prime of, my new age spiritual world and business, living in the prime, having all the clients, making all of the freaking money, preaching integrity. Like, that's the whole thing. Preaching integrity. There was so much that was not in integrity within my life. My life was chaos. My life was destruction. And there's so many people. And I'm not outing anybody in my spiritual community, but so many people whose lives were just havoc and destruction. And just like, what? The math wasn't mathing. The math was not mathing. Like, how is your life such a dumpster fire? And yes, with God, your life can be a dumpster fire, but it's just like, the math wasn't mathing, is all I have to say. Things were out of alignment. My personal life was just, the relationship that I was in was freaking toxic. I was toxic. I couldn't see the toxicity. I kept blaming my partner. And yes, they had their toxicity, but so did I. But at the same time, from that egoic state, I could do no wrong. But I was not living in accordance to God's will. I was not living like, being nice is one thing, but being kind is different. Being genuinely kind is different. I just see the holes that can happen when there's no parameters or guidelines on how to live correctly, on how to live in God's will. That's all I have to say. If I had to encapsulate this whole conversation, is if there are no rules or markers of what could be most beneficial, how do you know? You can have these feelings internally in the core of your being and your soul, But there's so much chaos and there's so much confusion out there, and you can get swayed and you can be distracted. You could be led astray in so many ways. So the more that we open ourselves up to God and having that relationship and knowing what is pleasing to God, to be in God's will, to be in God's favor, to follow the true divine nature of us connected to God, not us as humans. Humans are flawed. The divine nature of us connected to God, not us as the humans who are flawed. See how that rhymed? The more that we open ourselves up to that, you may see your life transform. And it might change in ways that you don't like or that you don't understand. But on that internal side and on that conscience side and on that feeling more connected and like more connected than you have ever been, and knowing that you're not alone in ways that you can't even formulate into words, it's worth it. Lots of love.